A very good morning, respected teachers and dear colleagues. Today, I'll be presenting part of my PhD thesis entitled Characterization of Energy and Substrate Metabolism in Patients with Liver Cirrhosis. This is the outline of my presentation. I'll begin with the background. So, as we all know, liver is considered as metabolic factory of the body. It is one of the high energy demanding organ, even though it contributes only about 2.6% of total body weight. It expends around 90% of the basal metabolic rate. Also, it is the central organ for the metabolism of major macronutrients, particularly carbohydrates and fats. Hence, it is evident that any alteration in liver function can clearly affect energy and substrate metabolism of the body as a whole. So to study, to measure, to understand these changes in energy and substrate metabolism, we have a gold standard non-invasive technique of indirect calorimeter, which simply measures the fraction of oxygen and fraction of carbon dioxide in inspired and expired gases in both spontaneously breathing and mechanically ventilated patients. And through various mathematical calculations, it gives a snapshot picture of energy expenditure and substrate metabolism. So this is very important slide to understand what actually IC indirect calorimeter output is and how we are going to study that. So basically, it measures volume of oxygen consumed and volume of carbon dioxide produced. And when these values are put in this Weir's equation, we get resting energy expenditure. So resting energy expenditure basically constitutes around 60 to 70% of our total energy requirements when we add diet-induced thermogenesis and activity-induced thermogenesis. We get total energy expenditure. Ideally, when we calculate energy requirements in spontaneously breathing, we have to consider all the three components, whereas in critical illness, since they are not physically active and diet-induced thermogenesis because of nasogastric feeding is minimal, so we can feed them as per the resting energy expenditure. So when we put the data of age, BMI, age, height, weight, and gender, the machine calculates predicted resting energy expenditure using Harris-Benedict equation, from which we can get what is called as metabolic state. It is simply a ratio of measured energy expenditure to the predicted energy expenditure, and it is usually presented in percentage. So we further classify it as hypermetabolic state, normometabolic state, and hypometabolic state. Basically, this metabolic state tells us about the energy demands of the person, whether patient has lower energy demands and higher energy demands, and how their body responds to the nutrition. For example, if it is hypermetabolic, their energy demands are high. And if you are not providing with the adequate calories, they end up in malnutrition. Whereas if patient is hypometabolic state, if you provide higher nutrition, they tend to gain weight. So simply when this again VCO2 and VO2, when simply we calculate the ratio of volume of carbon dioxide produced to volume of oxygen consumed, what we get is the respiratory quotient. So basically, respiratory quotient tells the substrate utilization of the body. When we consume a mixed substrate of normal diet, usually our RQ will be between 0.85 to 1. So when a person is overfeeding, most of the extra substrates are converted through non-oxidative metabolism like lipogenesis or glycogenesis, and their RQ may be more than 1. When a person is starving, then his RQ might be less than 0.8, suggesting more of fat oxidation. Physiological range of RQ is 0.67 to 1.3. So whenever we do IC, usually it should fall between this range. Otherwise, we need to repeat the test because it is considered not reliable. Also, when we put the values of 24-hour urinary nitrogen, the machine also calculates the percentage contribution of each macronutrients to the REE through using VO2, VCO2, and urinary nitrogen values using various mathematical calculations. So when we look into the literature, during past 3 decades, we have around 40 odd studies. So these are some of the important studies. So they are basically done in spontaneously breathing patients with liver cirrhosis, mainly alcoholic etiology, and few studies are there in HBV related ACLF. So the main important information what we get from these studies in liver cirrhosis are, liver cirrhosis is a state of accelerated starvation, meaning they achieve a state of starvation only after 6 hours of fasting with increased fat oxidation and increased fatty acid turnover. The most liver cirrhotics, the resting energy expenditure in liver cirrhosis is usually comparable with the healthy control. The metabolic state is varied in patients with liver cirrhosis. The hypermetabolic state, although it is not a constant feature, but it is associated with malnutrition and mortality in these patients. Certain nutritional interventions like nibbling pattern of food intake, late evening snack, these kind of nutritional interventions provide a period of metabolic anabolic opportunity in these patients, improving their fasting RQ and decreasing the fasting fat oxidation. Many predictive equations are there to calculate energy expenditure. They are usually not reliable in patients with liver cirrhosis. An increased energy expenditure is seen in hepatitis B related ACLF patients. So when we see this, we realize there are no studies of indirect calorimeter in critically ill ventilated patients with liver cirrhosis and also ventilated patients with acute and chronic liver failure. Even in spontaneously breathing, we don't have any Indian data to see how cirrhotics behave metabolically. So with this background and lacuna, we aim to characterize the energy and substrate metabolism in patients with liver cirrhosis. So before going to objectives, I would like to brief about our disease groups. This is a simple observational comparative parallel group study where we have a disease group and healthy controls. Disease group contain one group spontaneously breathing patients with liver cirrhosis from outpatient and some of hospitalized patients, further classified as child A, B, and C. We have critically ill ventilated patients with decompensated liver cirrhosis and with acute and chronic liver failure. So with this, our primary objective is to compare these 7 parameters which are obtained from indirect calorimeter between healthy controls and the disease groups. Secondary objective is intergroup comparison of IC parameters to compare the metabolic state between healthy and the disease groups, to compare the IC parameters between child status in spontaneously breathing patients with liver cirrhosis. Also, we will compare the energy and macronutrient intake and nitrogen balance between healthy and disease groups. So these are our patient population. Healthy controls are some volunteers, organ or blood donors, non-blood related relatives of patients without any chronic diseases or any long-term medication for any other disorder. Diagnosed patients with liver cirrhosis who are seen as outpatient in liver clinic or hospitalized in wards. ACLF is defined as per APACIL criteria who require ICU admission and mechanical ventilatory support. Critically ill cirrhotics are diagnosed cases of liver cirrhosis with 2 or more organ failures requiring ICU admission and mechanical ventilator support. So with this, we have 4 groups to compare. One is healthy controls containing 30 patients we have enrolled, liver cirrhosis with 53 patients. Among critically ill, we have 61 decompensated liver cirrhosis patients and 31 ACLF patients. Among all the groups, data was collected regarding indirect calorimeter output, nutritional assessment, and 24-hour urinary urea nitrogen, biochemical and clinical parameters. All the data was collected in a structured performa. So coming to the methodology, indirect calorimeter is actually a time-consuming process and a bit tedious for the patient, especially in spontaneously breathing. They need to collect 24-hour urine to the dietary record. They should come NPO at least for 8 hours, and all the patients were given information about how the test is done and written consent was taken. And indirect on the day of indirect calorimeter, usually it takes 30 minutes for the machine to warm up, and the standard calibration requires around 15 minutes. So patient is made to lie comfortably on a bed in a temperature and humidity control. This is very important, at least 15 minutes before the test. And they are instructed to breathe normally, to remain awake throughout the procedure. The test duration is around 20 to 30 minutes, and total duration is 60 to 90 minutes per patient. Similarly, in a ventilated patient, we do after warm-up and calibration as usual. There is some tube called flow REE, which is attached to the ventilator at the Y connector before HME filter. And we have to make sure for the reliable results, certain prerequisites are met. That is, no changes in ventilator setting 1 hour before indirect calorimeter. No any renal replacement therapy within 3 to 4 hours before IC. Patient should not be in an agitated state. FiO2 should be less than 70 and PEEP should be less than 12. So this is how this picture is not clear. Sorry for that, but this is how an indirect calorimetry report looks like. So it gives RMR or REE, RQ, VO2 and VCO2, which is measured value, the predicted values of the same, the coefficient of variation during the study period. Also, it gives minute ventilation, respiratory rate, and particularly FiO2, which should match with the ventilatory setting for the reliable results. It gives substrate oxidation of each macronutrient. So, for the test to be reliable and validated, we should make sure the steady state is attained, which is defined as if the coefficient of variation of VO2 and VCO2 should be less than 5% in a duration of 5 minutes in mechanical ventilation, and less than 10% of coefficient of variation for the duration of 5 minutes in spontaneously breathing, then we consider that that is a steady state value. We also calculated nitrogen balance in all patients and healthy controls. For that, 24-hour urine sample was collected, and urinary urea was estimated using standard Bunn kit by urease method using Beckman-Coulter analyzers. And this urinary urea, when it is divided by 2.14, we get urinary urea nitrogen. And then for total urine nitrogen output, we multiply urinary urea nitrogen with the factor 1.25, which suggests non-urea urinary nitrogen, and a constant factor of 4, which is nothing but non-urinary nitrogen losses through stools, integuments, and other secretions. So nitrogen intake is calculated by protein intake by the 2-day dietary record, and it is divided by a factor 6.25 for the from which we get nitrogen intake. So when we subtract total nitrogen intake to total nitrogen output, what we get is nitrogen balance. So statistical analysis, the continuous variables were compared between healthy and disease groups using one-way ANOVA with post-hoc Bonferroni test. Categorical variables are compared with chi-square test, and comparison of IC parameters adjusted for age and BMI between groups was done using Anakova test, expressed as mean plus minus standard error of mean, and p-value less than 0.05 considered as significant. So coming to the result. So when we see here, the age, gender distribution, and the BMI was significantly different between healthy controls and disease group. Ideally, we should have matched healthy controls, but it was difficult for us to find a typically healthy at a higher age. So what we did, all the parameters were hence analyzed in males and females separately, adjusted for age and BMI. So as females were very few in number in each group, so we were not able to derive any conclusion properly. So hence, currently only data of male patients is shown. So results as per the objectives. Primary objective was to compare these parameters between healthy and disease groups. So volume of oxygen consumption, overall there was significant difference between the groups, but when ACLF group had higher oxygen demand compared to healthy controls as well as critically ill serotics. Volume of carbon dioxide is significantly lower in patients in disease groups compared to healthy, and also in critical illness when compared to the spontaneously breathing. So that might signify incomplete oxidation of macronutrients or mitochondrial dysfunction. So resting energy expenditure is clearly higher in patients with ACLF compared to healthy as well as critical illness. Respiratory quotient is significantly lower in disease groups compared to healthy, and which signifies accelerated starvation or increased gluconeogenesis. The percentage carbohydrate oxidation at the resting stage or postprandial state is significantly lower in patients with liver cirrhosis, both in critically ill and spontaneously breathing, might signify severe lack of glycogen stores or impaired glucose metabolic oxidation. So percentage fat oxidation was significantly higher in patients with disease groups compared to healthy, which signifies increased utilization of fat in post-active state, which is again a part of accelerated starvation. When it comes for protein oxidation, it was comparable between the groups, which might signify conservation or tight regulation of protein metabolism. So our secondary objective is, first one is to compare the and disease groups. So when we see healthy controls, as expected, 83% were normometabolic, only few percentage were hyper and hypometabolic. When it comes to liver cirrhosis, the normometabolic state significantly reduces. It is only 25%. And the deranged state of hypo or hypermetabolic constitute around 55%. So in critical illness, again, the normometabolic state still comes down, and we can see here hypometabolic state is higher in patients with critical illness. When it comes to ACLF, 55% were normo and 29% were hypermetabolic. So we can say in both ventilated as well as spontaneously breathing, metabolic state is varied. The normometabolic state continuously decreases, except group, and 29% of ACLF were hypermetabolic, and critically ill decompensated liver cirrhotic patients are majority hypometabolic with low energy demands. So next is to compare the parameters between the child status and healthy controls. So when we compare this, we can see the volume of oxygen consumed, carbon dioxide produced, and the resting energy expenditure is comparable between the group. There was no significant difference. However, when it comes to the starvation state or RQ percentage of carbon dioxide oxidized and fat oxidation, we can see between healthy control and child day, there was no significant difference. They are comparable. But when the disease progresses from both healthy control as well as child day state, they are significantly different with low RQ, low carbohydrates oxidation, and high fat oxidation. So as the disease progresses, the accelerated starvation state worsens. So when it comes to protein, the protein oxidation remains constant or comparable between the groups. So coming to the comparison of energy and macronutrient intake and nitrogen balance between healthy and disease groups. So when we see ad libitum energy intake in patients with spontaneously breathing liver cirrhosis, it is significantly lower compared to critically ventilated patients as well as healthy controls. So clearly says that ad libitum intake is very less. These patients are well fed because of NG feeding. Similarly, the protein intake is comparable in healthy and liver cirrhotics, whereas in critically ill, they are the protein intake is quite higher because of, again, NG feeding. So again, there is no difference in the fat consumption in it is comparative between healthy controls and disease groups. Nitrogen intake is again lowest in liver cirrhotics, and it is higher in critically ill ventilated patients. So hence the nitrogen output is comparable between the groups. So finally, the nitrogen balance, even in healthy, we have slight negative nitrogen balance because is lower. In liver cirrhotics, the nitrogen balance is still more negative with -2.6, and in critical ill, both liver cirrhotics and ACLF, we have good positive nitrogen balance of 5 to 8. So now I'll discuss our main observations, summarize and discuss our main observation. So our first observation was the absolute RE is comparable between healthy and spontaneously breathing patients with liver cirrhosis. So there are so many studies who compared the RE between cirrhotic and control group. Majority of the studies showed there is no difference in the absolute RE. Few showed increased absolute RE compared to healthy. And some of the studies show no absolute difference, but when RE is expressed as per kg fat-free mass or per unit of muscle mass, the RE seems to increase. So absolute RE is also, our new finding in this is, even in critically ill ventilated patients, the absolute RE is, average absolute RE is comparable. So this could be the plausible cause, because RE is affected by so many factors, and especially in critical illness, factors are added like sedation, gluconeogenesis, hypo or hypothermia, increased minute ventilation, any agitation, excessive movement, or sepsis, inflammatory. So these are, so final result of RE depends on which direction RE is these factors drag RE. It might be increasing, it might be decreasing, or it may be variable day to day. So hence, when we average it out, it might be comparable with the healthy controls. Otherwise, in any critical illness, one would presume the energy expenditures are always higher, but it may not be true. So absolute energy expenditure is higher in ACLF compared to healthy controls and critically ill cirrhotics. Again, this ACLF group studies have shown in spontaneously breathing hepatitis B, the resting energy expenditure compared to both healthy controls and chronic hepatitis B is significantly higher. Even it is higher, still remains higher after normalizing for fat-free mass. What we are getting is, even in ACLF who are sedated and mechanical ventilated, their energy demands are still higher, which means to say again the interplay of various factors on RE. So RQ is significantly lower in disease groups compared to healthy controls. So in this study by Muller et al., what we can see is, compared to healthy controls, the postprandial RQ is significantly lower. Again, in these patients with hepatitis B related liver ACLF, the NPRQ is significantly lower. So our finding is, even in critically ill patients, both liver cirrhotics and ACLF, RQ is lower despite adequate feeding. So the plausible cause could be, so when we see RQ, majorly we compare it with the nutritional intake. But in critical illness, there are other factors which might decrease RQ, like hypoventilation, ethanol toxicity, excess of ketone bodies, alkalosis, gluconeogenesis, hypometabolic state. So these could be the possible cause of lower RQ despite feeding. So one more finding was, the oxidation of fat is high and that of carbohydrate is low in post-absorptive state in patients with liver cirrhosis. Protein oxidation remain comparable. So studies have shown that in alcoholic cirrhosis, non-alcohol related liver cirrhosis, and even in biliary cirrhosis, the glucose oxidation is, postprandial glucose oxidation is lower, the lipid oxidation is higher, and the protein oxidation remain constant in the post-absorptive state. So our finding in critical illness is, despite NG feeding, the oxidation of fat is high and carbohydrate is low, but protein oxidation again remains comparable. The cause of it should be need to analyze or study further. So when we compared the child status, the absolute RE remains comparable. This study by Pang et al. In 2007 clearly tells. So the absolute RE between child A, B, C is significant, comparable between the groups. So the RQ accelerated starvation worsens as disease severity worsens in patients with liver cirrhosis, with increasing fat oxidation and decreasing carbohydrate oxidation. Same results were shown by Muller et al. As the disease progresses, the protein oxidation remains constant, the fat oxidation increases, and the carbohydrate oxidation decreases. Observation is metabolic state is in a liver cirrhosis is variable. So, and as per this review, so around 50 to 60% were normometabolic, around 16 to 34% were hypermetabolic in patients with liver cirrhosis. So ours was 26% were hypermetabolic and 45 were normometabolic. In critical illness, we see 45% of patients with who are decompensated liver cirrhosis were hypometabolic, and 55% of ACLF are normo, with significant 9% were hypermetabolic. So ad libitum intake of calories and protein in spontaneously breathing liver cirrhosis is significantly lower, with a negative nitrogen balance of 2.6. So in this study, in patients waiting for liver transplantation, they have analyzed the that ad libitum intake of patients with liver cirrhosis. So their conclusion was they show a low level of adherence to the nutritional recommendations provided by the international guidelines, which is around 35 to 40 kilocalories. Critically ill patients are well fed mainly because of NG feeding with a positive nitrogen balance of 5 to 8. Rice tube feeding is well tolerated in these patients and help in meeting energy and macronutrient targets. So to conclude, the pattern of energy and substrate metabolism and effect of disease severity on metabolism in patients with liver cirrhosis belong to Asian Indian ethnicity is similar to as that described in the literature. The effect of critical illness and intubation in patients with liver cirrhosis is worsening of accelerated starvation with an increased hypometabolic state in critically ill patients with liver cirrhosis. Ventilated patients with liver ACLF also displayed accelerated starvation state with a higher calorie requirements compared to healthy and ventilated decompensated cirrhotics. The dietary intake in patients with liver cirrhosis is far from what is recommended. Nasogastric tube feeding is well tolerated in critically ill ventilated patients with liver cirrhosis and helps to achieve a positive nitrogen balance. Thank you.